Hi guys, my name is Sophie Farrow and I will be doing my Project 7 on the Veterinary Feed Directive. Basically, this is how the new FDA animal drug regulations have affected the US beef industry. So just a brief overview of the issue. The Veterinary Feed Directive, also called the VFD, was developed to reduce the level of livestock exposure to antimicrobial medications and drugs. Decreasing antibiotic exposure scientifically implies less risks for microbial adaptation and resistance to modern drug technologies. The Veterinary Feed Directive places harsh emphasis on labeling tactic and veterinary approval prior to antimicrobial drug use in livestock feedstuffs. So basically, these drugs have to be labeled as therapeutic use and not necessarily medical use. So regulations within the VFD. The original VFD was established in 1996. This classified different drugs, which includes the OTC, or over-the-counter, or prescription medications. No prescriptions were actually required at the time to provide medicated feedstuffs to the herd, and thus all medicated feedstuffs were considered over-the-counter. The sudden onset of MRSA and E. coli following this in livestock enacted the 2016 revision to the VFD, which then classifies medicated feed as a VFD drug instead of an over-the-counter drug. Pharmaceutical and feed companies, as said before, cannot label medicated feed using production terms, only therapeutic usage. And then all medicated feed requires veterinary prescription. And this was set into effect in 2019, which caused a little bit of backlash in the ranching community. So this backlash resulted from some pretty major implications, specifically for farmers within the beef industry. Financial strain resulting from increased veterinary cost and drug prices. You have to pay a veterinarian to come there and sign up on the feedstuffs that you're planning to provide. The decrease in labor and time efficiency. It takes a while to get a hold of a rural veterinarian. This has a lot to do with my previous lecture about how there is a big shortage of rural veterinarians, and this was definitely shown during the implication of the new VFD law. Increased risk of herd exposure. So when an animal gets sick, it takes more time to get approved medicine for that sick animal, and therefore poses more risk for exposure to other animals. There is a massive increase in required documentation, and there's overall less freedom in production choices for each farmer. So what happens if we do not have any VFD regulations? So there's a couple different things. I'm from the University of Minnesota, and we have done a couple studies on MRSA. This is actually a strip I just found off the internet, but it shows a strain of MRSA. It's short for methicillin-resistant staphylococcus. This would be livestock-associated strain. Basically, it just shows how resistant the bacteria organism is. On the strip, you can see at the top would be the drug that is most effective in reducing the existence of the bacteria. And then on the bottom of the strip is going to be the drugs that have been depleted or now the organism is resistant to. So another major one, this is going to be a major implication for mastitis, specifically in dairy cattle, but can also arise in beef cattle as well. It's going to be the beta-lactam resistant strains of E. coli. Those are just the two major ones, but there's a lot of Salmonella Camelobacter strains as well that are really apparent in livestock populations. So essentially these multi-drug resistant bacteria result from the continuous use of new antibiotics that are used to treat resistant strains, but then cause new resistance to the modern drugs that we used to treat the previous disease. So ultimately, this poses major health risks to both human and animal populations. So the overall resistance trends. So found this graph over here. It's really interesting to look at. It just shows just how resistant each microbial or antimicrobial drug is becoming, or how we're overall depleting our resources within that drug category. So these graphs pretty much show trend lines through 18 years, 2000 2018. And it provides kind of a visual on the proportion of antimicrobial drugs with resistant higher than 50% in various livestock industries. So as you can see, from 2000 to 2018 in chickens, it'll jump from 15% or 0.15 to 0.41 in chickens. That's a pretty huge jump. That's going to be the most major increase in microbial resistance. That usually has to do a lot with the avian flu. Also include salmonella strains. And then it's going to go 0.13 to 0.34 in swine, which is going to be this middle box. And then about a double increase from 0.12 to 0.23 in cattle. The cattle industry does have the least amount of antimicrobial depletion out of most livestock categories, but still is a major issue. So there's going to be varying perspectives to any sort of regulation, but the VFD has some pretty major conflictions on either side. So while the VFD is widely agreed upon, many ranchers believe that the increased cost of veterinary care makes it nearly impossible to create efficient profit under this new directive. The scientific community believes that antimicrobial resistance may be the biggest threat to human populations as of the present age, so thus we cannot ignore it for profit. My personal perspective is that farmers struggling under the VFD regulations should be given government subsidies in order to pay for veterinary costs associated with the new law. And the VFD is super important for animal and human health, but there must be financial support in order to expect farmers to correctly reduce antimicrobial resistance. So in conclusion, the selection of antimicrobial compounds available to the livestock community is becoming depleted due to the onset of antimicrobial resistance. Resistance stems from overexposure to antimicrobial drugs, particularly in livestock feed. The VFD sought to reduce exposure to antimicrobial compounds in an attempt to slow resistance patterns. And trends show, in agreement with the VFD, massive depletion of affected drug portfolios. And thank you so much for watching.